everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be exploring the cosmos. As seen through the eyes of the one and only Carl Sagan, we've got some fascinating excerpts from his book, Cosmos. And we're going to cover everything from ancient measurements of the Earth to the possibility of alien life out there.
Oh, yeah. Sagan was a master at making complex ideas accessible to everyone. He could make you feel like you were right there with him on a grand cosmic adventure.
Right. And he starts off with the story about Eratosthenes, this ancient Greek dude who figured out the Earth's circumference like over 2,000 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Eratosthenes. I mean, can you imagine figuring that out with no telescopes or satellites?
It just blows my mind. Like, all he had was shadows and some serious brain power.
Yeah, so get this. He noticed that on the summer solstice at noon, the sun shone straight down a well in Sagan. There was no shadow at all.
Okay.
But at the same time, up in Alexandria, a stick stuck in the ground cast a shadow. And by knowing the distance between those two cities and the angle of that shadow, Eratosthenes used like basic geometry to work out the Earth's curvature.
And bam, he got the circumference, just like that.
It's incredible, really.
It really is. I mean, this one little observation about shadows led to this massive leap in understanding the size of our planet.
And you know, that discovery wasn't just some fun fact. It actually changed the course of history.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, think about Columbus. He used Eratosthenes' calculations to plan his voyage across the Atlantic.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. So this simple observation about shadows ended up leading to the discovery of the Americas.
Exactly, it ripples through time. And Sagan makes this really cool comparison to early globes. You know how they were pretty accurate around the Mediterranean, but as you got further away, they got super distorted?
Yeah, like all wonky and weird.
Exactly. He says it's kind of like our understanding of the cosmos today.
So we're still kind of making those distorted maps, huh?
In a way, yeah. We know a lot about our own little corner of the universe. But the further out we look, the more mysterious it gets.
It makes you realize just how much we still don't know.
Right, and speaking of pushing the boundaries of what we know, Sagan was really fascinated by evolution.
That mind-blowing idea that all life on Earth shares a common ancestor.
And he ties that to the stars. You know, pointing out that the elements that make up life, like hydrogen and carbon and all that, they're all forged in the hearts of stars.
Whoa, so we're literally made of stardust.
Pretty much. And what's even cooler is that Sagan challenges this idea that Earth was perfectly designed for life.
Like some grand plan.
He says it's more like life adapted to what Earth had to offer.
So the organisms that couldn't hack it, they just didn't make it and were descended from the survivors.
Exactly, the ones who thrived in this particular environment.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
And that brings up a huge question. If life emerged on Earth through this series of seemingly random events, couldn't the same thing happen on other planets with completely different conditions?
Makes you wonder what kind of crazy life forms might be out there.
Right, and Sagan gets into the details of how evolution actually works. This dance between mutation and natural selection.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty complex process.
It's all about tiny changes happening over vast stretches of time.
Like a super slow motion movie.
Imagine this primordial soup filled with molecules. They're constantly replicating and making copies of themselves. But every now and then there's a mistake.
A mutation.
Exactly. And most of those mutations are useless or even harmful.
So it's like a cosmic lottery.
Kind of, but every once in a while a mutation pops up that actually gives an organism an advantage.
So it's like hitting the jackpot.
And when that happens, natural selection kicks in.
Survival of the fittest.
Right? Organisms with that beneficial trait are more likely to survive and reproduce, and they pass on that trait to their offspring.
So over time, these tiny changes can add up and lead to entirely new species.
Exactly, from those single-celled organisms in the primordial soup to all the amazing diversity of life we see today.
Including us.
And Sagan really emphasizes the immense time scale involved here. We're talking billions of years for life to arise and evolve.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Like our own little lives are just a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of things.
And Sagan reminds us that we're part of this much bigger story. Our very existence is the result of billions of years of cosmic evolution.
All right, get ready for a mystery. Sagan takes us to Siberia in 1908, where this crazy event known as the Tunguska event happened.
Oh yeah, the Tunguska event. A massive explosion that flattened trees for miles.
And get this, there was no impact crater.
It left scientists baffled for decades.
So what caused it?
Well, Sagan suggests it was probably a cometary fragment, mostly ice and dust that entered the Earth's atmosphere. and exploded before it could hit the ground.
Like a giant cosmic ice bomb.
And that airburst would explain why there's no crater.
That's a pretty close call.
It makes you realize that these impact events aren't just something from the distant past.
Yeah.
They can happen again.
And we see evidence of impacts all over the solar system.
Like on the moon and Mars.
It makes you think about our own planet's vulnerability.
Right, and it highlights how important it is to study these phenomena.
Right.
And maybe even figure out ways to deflect them if they pose a threat to Earth.
So understanding the cosmos isn't just about satisfying our curiosity, it's also about survival.
Exactly, and there's another threat we need to talk about, one that we're creating ourselves.
What's that?
Sagan gets pretty serious when he talks about the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah.
And the greenhouse effect.
He compares Earth to Venus.
He does. Both planets have a greenhouse effect, where certain gases trap heat from the sun. But on Venus, it's gotten completely out of control. It's a runaway greenhouse effect, with temperatures hot enough to melt lead.
Wow, that's terrifying.
It gets also can happen when a planet's atmosphere gets thrown out of whack.
And Sagan's point is that we're messing with our own atmosphere.
By burning fossil fuels and pumping carbon dioxide into the air, we're amplifying the natural greenhouse effect and causing the planet to warm up.
So we're basically playing with fire.
And Sagan asks this really important question. How will we use this power? We have the knowledge and the technology to affect the climate. But do we have the wisdom to use it responsibly?
That's a big question for sure.
It's a challenge to our values and our long-term thinking.
Well, that's a lot to think about. But we'll be back after a quick break to explore even more of Sagan's incredible insights. Stay tuned. So we left off talking about how we're kind of messing with the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, and Sagan, he doesn't shy away from those tough questions about our impact on the planet. But he also had this incredible optimism about the potential for life beyond Earth.
Especially on Mars, right?
Oh, yeah, he was fascinated by Mars. He really believed it was the most likely place in our solar system to find some kind of extraterrestrial life.
Even if it was just microbes.
Exactly. He wasn't necessarily expecting little green men, but he thought there was a good chance that something might be living under the surface.
One thing I always found interesting was how he described the challenges of landing on Mars.
Oh, yeah. It's not easy. It's like trying to land a feather on a windy day because the atmosphere is so thin.
He talks about the Viking mission in the 70s and how they had to use this massive parachute to slow the spacecraft down.
Yeah, almost 60 feet across, I think it was. And they still had to choose a landing site at a lower elevation, where there was a bit more atmosphere to work with.
It's pretty amazing when you think about the precision it takes to get something to Mars.
Let alone land it safely.
Right, and then there's the whole question of what kind of life might be there.
Sagan was really intrigued by these things called extremophiles, organisms that can survive in the most extreme environments.
Extremophiles? Like what kind of environments?
Well, think about those tiny creatures that live in boiling hot springs, or frozen in ice, or even in places that are super acidic.
So basically the toughest little critters on Earth.
Exactly, and Sagan thought if life could exist in those conditions here, maybe it could survive on Mars too.
So he was basically looking for Martian versions of those extremophiles.
He was, and he actually conducted experiments in Antarctica to see if earthly microbes could handle a simulated Martian environment.
And some of them did.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about.
What if there's life hiding beneath the surface of Mars?
It could be in pockets of water, or in those more sheltered spots.
That's a pretty exciting thought. But then Sagan throws this curveball. He connects the search for life on Mars to this story about Jean-Francois Champollion deciphering hieroglyphics.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. At first I was like, wait, what do hieroglyphics have to do with Mars?
It seemed like a total sidetrack.
But Sagan, he brings it all together. It's about the act of decoding, of figuring out a language that's completely alien to us.
Just like Champollion cracked the code of hieroglyphs.
Exactly. He used the Rosetta Stone with its Greek translations to unlock the secrets of ancient Egyptian writing.
And Sagan's saying we need to do the same thing with the universe.
We need to learn how to read the language of the cosmos.
Which is written in starlight and maybe even in radio waves from distant galaxies.
And that's where radio astronomy comes in.
Sagan thought radio waves were the best way for civilizations to communicate across vast distances.
It's like shouting across a cosmic ocean.
But how do we even know where to listen?
Well, Sagan talks about the Drake equation. It's this formula that tries to estimate the number of civilizations in our galaxy that might be able to communicate.
I've seen that equation. It has a lot of variables, though.
It does. It considers things like the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars that have planets, how many of those planets could support life, and the likelihood of intelligent life evolving on those planets.
Seems like a lot of guesswork.
There's definitely a lot of uncertainty. But even using conservative estimates, the Drake equation suggests there could be millions of civilizations out there.
Millions. That's mind-boggling.
Right, so the sky could be filled with radio messages, just waiting for us to tune in.
It's kind of like a cosmic game of hide and seek.
And Sagan was convinced that we weren't alone. But he also acknowledged that many civilizations might not make it.
They might destroy themselves through conflict or environmental disasters.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah, it makes you realize how important it is to protect our own planet.
And to learn from the mistakes of others.
He talks about the Aztecs, right?
He does. They had a sophisticated civilization, but they were ultimately conquered by the Spanish.
It's a reminder that even advanced civilizations can be vulnerable.
And that we need to be aware of the potential threats out there.
But you know what I find really fascinating? Is Sagan's exploration of what those other civilizations might be like.
Oh yeah, he really pushes us to think outside the box.
To imagine beings that are completely different from us.
With different ways of thinking, different senses, different ways of experiencing reality.
Shall we dive into that next? Okay, so we were talking about just how different alien life might be.
Right, like what would it even mean to be intelligent in a completely different environment? On a planet with different gravity, different atmosphere. You know, their whole way of experiencing the world could be so foreign to us.
Yeah, it's hard to even wrap your head around it. It's like trying to imagine a new color that we've never seen before.
And Sagan points out that our own way of thinking is shaped by our evolution here on Earth. Our senses, our brains, the way we perceive time. It's all based on what worked for survival on this planet.
So on another planet, those rules could be completely different.
Imagine beings with senses that we don't even have. Or brains that are wired in ways we can't comprehend.
What if they can perceive dimensions that are invisible to us?
Or communicate through telepathy or something.
It's mind-blowing.
And their technology could be so advanced that it would seem like magic to us.
Right, like they might have figured out interstellar travel.
Or harness the power of black holes.
Or even cracked the code of consciousness.
It makes you wonder how they would view us.
Would we seem like primitive ants to them?
Or maybe a threat. Or just a curiosity.
I mean, can you imagine what we could learn from a civilization that's millions of years ahead of us?
It would revolutionize our understanding of science and technology.
And philosophy and art and everything.
But, you know, there's also the possibility that they wouldn't even notice us.
Or that they'd be completely indifferent to our existence.
It's a humbling thought.
It is. It makes you realize that we're not necessarily the center of the universe.
But even if we never make contact, just the act of searching for other intelligences can teach us so much about ourselves.
It expands our horizons and makes us question our assumptions about our place in the cosmos.
And that's what I love about Sagan. He never lost that sense of wonder, that childlike curiosity about the universe.
Right. He always reminded us that there's so much more out there to discover.
And that our exploration has just begun.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Carl Sagan's cosmos.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep looking up.